Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most. Tucker told me I start too many of these intros with, we go all over the place. So specifically, we're going to talk about the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 trailer for maybe 25 seconds. And then the rest of the podcast is totally different. So if that primes your pump, you're really only going to like the first 2 minutes of the podcast, but stick around for the rest because there's some really good stuff. Sit back, relax, enjoy, or don't enjoy. I don't care. You're already listening. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
2 movie trailers that have really hooked me in the past week. Beetlejuice. Mm-hmm. Love the title.
Yeah.
Sonic 3.
You know what's funny? I haven't watched the Sonic 3 trailer. I keep meaning to find time because you watched Sonic 2, right?
With you.
Did you go to that did we see Sonic 2 as well? I knew we saw Sonic 1.
I thought we saw Sonic 2 together. Did we not? Or did I get mad at you that you went without me?
I think you got mad at me that I went.
I don't remember now.
I mean, because we had so much fun at Sonic.
Yeah, I could have swore we were going to see 2 together, but 3.
Do you want to see 3 together? Yeah. Or Beetlejuice together?
Yeah, I wanted to see Sonic 2 together as well. Okay. Thank you very much. So I think
we'll see them both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Will you come to Wicked with me?
See, no, you owe me a movie. See, that's how that works. I'll go, but I'm going to give it running commentary the whole time.
Can I tell you a truth about trailers? Once a year, there's a trailer that they play too much. And it's usually a movie where they're trying to decide who's the audience. Right, we're not really certain who this movie fits.
If they release multiple trailers,
right?
Yep.
So the one is Speak No Evil. It's a movie with James McAvoy coming out where he meets a couple and they're like in rural Italy, and he's like, "Oh, you should come over and stay with us at our farmhouse." So they do, but it turns out he's a weirdo.
Yeah, he's clearly some kind of killer or something.
And like he cut his kid's vocal cords out or something. I've seen that trailer, and I kid you not, 20 times this summer in front of movies that. Clearly they're like, maybe this will be a movie that's for horror fans. Maybe it's a suspense movie. Maybe it's something because James McAvoy, people will remember him as Professor X. And so it was before Wolverine and Deadpool. I'm like, who is this movie aimed towards? I was shocked I didn't see it in front of Inside Out 2.
I wonder how much it made, because when I saw the trailer, I just thought...
It isn't even out yet.
I was going to say, like... Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. What I meant to say was how much it cost to make. That's what I meant to say. Because I'm like, God, is it going to make its money back? Because it just doesn't look good. It just looks like, whatever. James McAvoy in the woods.
I've gotten into this weird thing where I will look up the Wikipedia for a movie to see how much it cost to make and then how much it made. So, for example, the original American Pie film cost $11 million. It made $232 million in the summer of 1999, 25 years ago. And then the next movie cost like $22 million and it made $240 million. And so it never had quite the same amount of like money. But do you realize that the American Pie franchise, just the ones that featured the main characters from the original leading up to American Reunion, which is the last one, made over $1 billion?
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah. The first one was a cultural zeitgeist.
It was
in sort of what was the Ben Stiller movie? There's Something About Mary. It felt like there was a similar zeitgeist in that it was like grossed out sexual comedy on some level, right? I can't believe what scene they put in this movie.
And to be honest, they hadn't made a teen sex comedy in a long time, and that was a major thing in the 80s. If you said, well, it's some seniors during spring break, they're like, sold. We don't need it anymore. In fact, one of Tim Robbins' first movies is called like Bachelor Spring Break, and it is delightfully bad. Hold on. fill some time here for me because there's a character and I want to say his name is like Leisure Suit or something like that's the character's name in this.
The thing I'm worried about with Sonic 3 is that I'm not going to watch the Knuckles like streaming show.
And you'll need to know stuff.
I'm worried I'm going to need to know stuff.
I don't think that you'll need to know it. Do you think you will?
I might.
I also am not watching the Knuckles television show.
Sure.
Just so that we're all on the same.
I am a bit worried too that Sonic 3, because now it's leaving the era of Sonic that I was a kid for. What is it?
I remembered what his name was, and you're gonna love it because it's part of it's who you are.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna derail it. It's called Fraternity Vacation from 1985. It's an hour and 34 minutes long.
Why is that who I am?
No, but hold on. Tim Robbins' character's name is Larry, in quotes, Mother Tucker.
So Larry Tucker, and they call him Mother Tucker.
Mother Tucker. Then there's Chaz and Wendell and Joe.
That's hilarious. I had some friends who called me Mother Tucker in high school.
There's Charles Rocket played a character named Madman Mac.
Who's Charles Rocket?
Oh, you don't know? Charles Rocket was the first person to be fired from SNL for dropping the F-bomb.
Oh.
And then goes to be in a bunch of... He's in Dumb and Dumber. He's like the guy who actually orchestrated the kidnapping.
Oh, shit. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And he was in the It's Pat movie. He's the foible
villain
in that, yeah. And then he died by suicide.
No shit.
Yeah. Charles Rocket is a tragic case in Hollywood.
Damn.
He was one of the first cases where they had to start talking about mental health.
Wow.
Because he had been deeply, deeply troubled for a long time and just no one knew how to talk about it.
Great name.
Yeah. Charles Rocket. And he was very young when Hocus Pocus. He's the dad in Hocus Pocus. I mean, here's the thing. He had a pretty amazing career. He's in Dances with Wolves. He had a pretty amazing career that was just cut short. And so, like a lot of people said he never got over being fired from SNL for dropping the F-bomb.
I mean, Shane Gillis is doing great. He's doing,
so far so
he's
good,
doing
right?
better than he's ever been after hosting SNL.
Ooh, he was in Tom and Huck. He played Judge Thatcher in that.
Is that the Tom and Huck with Jonathan Taylor Thomas?
That's the one.
Who plays Huck in that?
Oh, he was also a big heartthrob at that era. It was Brad Renfro.
Yes, there you go.
Renfro, yeah. In fact, there's a brand of refried beans called Renfro's Refried Beans, and I always wondered if there's any connection between the two of them.
It's like a Newman's Own.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to make a bean company and then donate
I want to refry those beans.
Donate the proceeds to charity.
Tucker, I want to get real for a second after our fun intro here.
You gotta remember, we're coming off our Applebee's meal we just had too.
We did have a good Applebee's meal.
Yeah.
And I shared with you that I had a personal experience that kind of has stuck to my ribs.
It can be dangerous to get real during and after Applebee's, but with you, I feel comfortable.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I was recently, so within the last week of us recording this podcast was my friend Shelly Fink's birthday. And this is the first birthday that we've had where since she passed last Christmas Eve. And I'm not okay. I have had a very difficult time processing this death, and it's come up quite a bit. And I'm no stranger to grief in my life. I mean, I had a lot of that in my youth. You know, I've lost close friends within a short window of each other between Jared and Dustin, both of my parents, all of my grandparents. It just, death is not something that is a foreign to me, but I have found myself finding moments where I thought, God, this is where I wish Shelly was here. I tore out a deck this summer. And I thought to myself, this is the type of project I would have called to ask my friend Shelly to come help me with. And I was recently trying to do a little personal work on this, right? And thinking why has this stuck with me for so much longer? And not that you ever get over the passing of a loved one, but why does this one? I mean, I will open my phone and see a picture of her and not be able to cope for a little bit and have to bring myself back to a center. And I think it's because of this. I first met Shelly because she was a part of the summer theater program in Rutland, North Dakota. She was 11 years old that summer when I first went down there. And I realized that I knew her as a girl, then as a young woman, and then into her adult life. And she's not my daughter. She's not my sister, but there's a feeling about my relationship with her. You know, you and I have known each other for almost that same amount of time, but I don't have those feelings towards you. I look at you just as a friend.
We grew up together. You watched her grow up.
Right. And I feel like I had a hand
absolutely
in who she was today. And
you were a huge part of all those kids' lives in Rutland, but especially
right?
Shelly.
And it hurts. Yeah. It is a nonstop reminder. And also because she was just such a good person too, right? Like she had everything to give to the world, and she was so kind, and she was so generous, and she was such a weirdo. And we need more of those in the world. You know, when we played the eulogy I gave for Shelly right here on the JJ Meets World podcast, you can go back and listen to it. But I can't remember if I told this story or if it was just something that we reminisced about, but there was a day where she said, hey, she called and said, hey, are you home? And I said, sure. She dressed up to my house. She showed up to my house dressed up like a cat. And she had
this, I don't remember.
Cat ears. She had a cat jumpsuit, a tail. She had painted on like whiskers. And I said, well, what's happening? What's going on? And she goes, oh, Zach is studying right now, and he wasn't going to like accept this. And so she's like, I thought I'd come over here. And then she walked around my house like a cat. And it was just, you know, she needed a way to do something. She wanted to do something. And this is the weird thing. Then her mother-in-law told me at the funeral that there was a day where she was dressed up like a rabbit, and Zach said, could you get changed? We're going to go to dinner with my family. And she goes, no, I'm a rabbit. And he goes, okay. And he called her bluff, and they went out and they were eating at a Perkins, and she goes, could you give me some rabbit food? And they literally brought her a plate of carrots and celery, and she was going to 100% stay in that mode the whole time. And I mean, she's a quirky, a weird person, and I'm having trouble moving forward. And it's getting to be more and more difficult as time goes on, because I'm finding more things that I miss about my dear friend. And, you know, recently I was talking to someone about some improv stuff, and I said, you know, who would have been the most excited about this opportunity that we have going forward would be Shelly. So I need to say this out loud. And so I'll say it to the JJ Meets World listening audience, but I'm having a really tough time with this, and I don't know what to do to make it better. And not that I think it needs to be cured, not that I think I need to get quote unquote over it, but I'm in a holding pattern right now, and I'm not progressing forward at all.
Well, keep in mind, the circumstances of her death were far different than most people's. I mean, we're talking about someone who was incredibly healthy. There was no even idea that she had any issues that would have ended her life. And so it's not just that your friend died, but your friend was ripped away from you all of a sudden, right? And you've experienced that before too, but you know, with other friends of ours who have passed, there was maybe an element of it's shocking but not surprising or something like that, right? They were going down a dark path. Things weren't going great. Whereas one day, you know, I knew Shelly, but not that well. Like I wasn't close to her. And I remember how I felt when you texted me that day. It just like, what are you talking about? That's absurd. Right. It's such an absurd thing to suddenly, especially on Christmas Eve. It was Christmas Eve. Right?
It was.
Right. So
it was a living nightmare. And it was one of those things where at first I thought, well, there's no way that this is real. This must be someone must have this must be like someone's hacked a phone and is sending this and is going to try and get me to send money or something like that. And so even when I was trying to confirm that it was true, it it still didn't seem real. I mean, I will even say this, even to the point of where during the funeral, it didn't seem real. And Shelley had been gone. She served our country in the North Dakota Air National Guard. And so there were chunks of time where she was gone, and she was, not only during her service, but when she was training. And so I think part of me feels like she's just in training, right? Like she's somewhere else and she'll come back eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. She was taken away from you all of a sudden, and it's her birthday right now, right? Mm-hmm. So the circumstances are just primed for you to still be dealing with elements of it, just like you're probably still dealing with elements of your dad dying, right? But it's different. So not that you need me to tell you this, but I guess maybe for the good of the order, is that, you're on the early part of that process with her, and it's going to be different because of the circumstances surrounding it. So this is the first, right? This is the first birthday, and then there's going to be the first anniversary of her death. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be other firsts, right? That you're going to remember. If I try to parallel my own experience to it, I always go back to Matthew. And that was the first time I felt, over the span of a year, sudden waves of grief that I didn't see coming. It wasn't even like I had seen something that reminded me of him or something. Just all of a sudden, I could just be out for a walk or driving to McDonald's or whatever, and boom, this wave of grief would hit me. It didn't happen with any of my grandparents. Even though Matthew was sick for a long time, so I had been dealing with the fact that I knew he was going to die, but it was different. And this is far different for you than Dustin or Jared or anyone else that you've lost. So I'm really sorry you're going through this, bud, but I think it's also really healthy that you're talking about it.
Yeah. And I realize I need to talk about it, right? I need to vocalize this because I know there's other people out there who are going through and feeling hurt from it. And it's just one of those moments, like you just got to put it out there. And not that I want to spend every day talking about Shelley and things like that, but there certainly are moments that just kind of grab you. And, one of the things I cherish is Shelley got into sending voice messages. And so I have a ton of these voice messages that I've pulled off of, my not my voicemail, but like, in your text based, your textual messages.
Yeah.
And I've recorded them so that I can keep them for posterity. And that reminded me, there was a guy named Jerry Haga, who is a frat brother of my dad's. And it was about a year after my dad died, and Jerry had called me and asked if I would go to lunch with him. And I said, well, sure, that's great. And he goes, meet me at my office first. And so I went to his office, and on his voicemail was the last message my dad had left him. And he said, I haven't been able to delete it yet. And he goes, I don't listen to it very often, but every now and then I just want to hear your dad's voice.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I think that there's something about that is a little bit of magic, and it kind of brings it back. I'm in an interesting place because when I turned 39, I was essentially it had been half my life with my dad and half my life without. And now I've actually lived longer, like more than half my life has been without my dad. And those days keep adding up. Right. And my sister said it so succinctly at my wedding, which is, Jill, you never got a chance to meet our dad, but I'm sure that he would have really liked you. Mm-hmm. And I think about that in a long time, because there's so many people who are so close to me in my life who never got to meet my dad. And he was such a big part of who I am. And just like, even recently, I was chatting with some of my friends, and they're like, hey, I remember the first time your mom really freaked out and I was there, and I kind of realized, like, oh, things are not all great and rosy over at JJ's house. And I'm like, yeah, those were awful moments.
I remember a couple of freakouts.
Yep, right?
I never met your dad.
Yeah.
But I remember when he died, because I knew you, and you knew my dad at that moment in time too. And I remember him giving our friends advice on how to help you, as having lost his dad at one point too.
Which is funny, because I associate something very, very specifically with your dad and my dad's death.
Really?
And I had never heard this before, and quite frankly, I've never heard it since. But your dad said, well, is there going to be a layout? Because we'll come to the layout.
Oh.
And I was like,
The wake?
what? Yeah, and I wanted to be like, like the celebration of life, but your dad kept referring to it as the layout.
That's probably a Kentucky thing or something.
Probably is, right?
Probably is, yeah.
And
just like saying I'd like a Coke, please. Diet Pepsi.
I also recently on that tangent. So if you were to buy a raffle ticket where half of the money collected goes to a person and then half goes to a charity, do you have a name for that type of raffle?
I don't know.
So
I have nothing.
I've always heard of it as a 50-50 raffle.
Okay.
So 50% goes to you, 50% goes to charity. Well, recently,
if you're the one selling the tickets.
Yeah. Okay. So like, Tucker, do you want to buy into the Line Benders 50-50 raffle?
Got it.
We're raising, money for muscular dystrophy.
50 goes to Line Benders, 50 goes to MD.
No. Well, 50 would go to you if you won it. So it's a raffle. It's a raffle.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this thing. I'm thinking of that as like the commission that the person selling the raffle ticket. I was like, God, that seems like a lot.
Yeah, I'd be like, whoa.
50% seems like a lot.
But yeah, so it would. Do
you want to give me $20 so you can give them $20?
Right, exactly. You don't get any tax benefit from it whatsoever. You don't even get to feel good about it because it's our name on the check.
This is why I don't run raffles.
It is.
Or most things.
I've always heard of that as a 50-50 raffle, but recently someone just called it a split pot. Oh, do you want to take? We got a split pot raffle.
That's a phrase I know for sure.
You've heard split pot raffle?
That's a poker for to chop the pot or to split the pot is a poker term.
I've never heard chop the pot.
Yep. So like side tangent from this, let's say you're playing in a poker tournament, you're down to the last two players. They could say, hey, do you just want to chop it? And that means we'll come up with an agreement of who's taking what percentage and we'll just call it now, right? So if like first pays 50% and second pays 30%, you might at first place, 50%, and second place pays 30 or 20, and the rest would have been split up, but whatever, you'd come up with more of like a 60-40 or something like that. But first place and then we don't have to sit here and the first place person goes, hey, I'm still making more money than had I gotten second place, right?
Sure.
So that's chopping the pot, split or splitting the pot would also just be you both win equally, so it goes 50-50.
Oh, that's interesting.
There we go. That's my side tangent.
No. Let's split that tangent again. Let's see how many tangents we can split before we find our way back to the original conversation, which is Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
That is the original.
That's the original.
I wasn't sure if Shelley was the original or Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I think we're both on the same page.
I know I did tell this story at one point. In fact, recently, here we go. This is where we'll find it, right? So Shelley went with me to go see The Dark Knight Rises, the third in the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. And the lights are the trailers have played. Greg Marcus has welcomed you and said, anyway, enjoy the film. And Shelley leans into me. I mean, as the Warner Brothers logo is coming up, and she goes, I haven't seen the other two. Do I need to know anything? And I said, well, what do you know about Batman? And she's like, and at this point, she didn't know that there's a difference between like Batman and Spider-Man, that they are in different universes. And so she watches that movie and like, she's like, why was that woman in black leather? You're like, and I'm like, oh, I don't know where to go with this.
Where are all the horses?
Right. Yeah. Like, does Batman ever fight on a horse? But it reminded me of this, of like kind of getting into something that you don't really know. Do you remember when you invited me to play poker because you guys were testing out like some equipment? Yeah. And so you just got a bunch of people together to play poker.
Warm
and stuff
bodies
like that.
just to sit at the table. No money actually being exchanged and stuff. And
I had there were I was playing against a bunch of people and there is an ace on the flop. Okay. And I had 3 4s. Because I had 2 3s,
so
I had pocket fours,
and then you hit a
one. Yep,
4.
Exactly.
So ace 4, nothing.
And so,
I mean, the 4 is almost nothing, but you had a pair.
Yeah. So this is going on, and there's one other guy, and he's like adding in. And I'm like, oh, this guy's probably got aces, right? Mm-hmm. He's got 2 aces. Is there a name for that?
2 aces, pocket aces.
Well, he doesn't have it in a pocket. He's got a pair.
He's got a pair. Okay.
But is there like a fun name because it's aces?
American Airlines.
Oh.
The rocket ships. There's probably more.
Okay.
But that's oftentimes if you have it, if it's in your hold cards, you draw American Airlines.
Okay.
There's also the Dolly Parton.
Was that
it's the 9 to 5 straight?
I love that.
Yep.
So if people are be like Dolly Parton, everyone knows 9 to 5. Oh, I love that.
Yep.
So I don't know if you remember how I played my last hand in that game.
Lady Kings, pair of queens. Sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. You can keep naming names like hands.
A boat's a full house.
A boat.
Yeah. I got a full boat.
Oh, I thought it was like a Canadian, like a boot.
No, like a boat.
Yeah. Like a boat, like a, why?
I don't know. It's
why not call it a full house?
It's weird slang. I mean, just more slang. It's slang on top of slang.
Okay.
It's what happens when strangers are sitting around a table looking at each other, drinking beer and trading money.
I know what our next tangent's going to be. Okay. So remind me of that slang, poker slang. Okay. Just remind me of that. So the last hand that I played, I went all in because I'm positive that this guy's got aces and he thinks, oh, I'm going to beat you because I got a pair of aces. Right.
Okay.
And there was also a jack out there, but I'm like, no matter, there's no other.
So he's got ace jack. He's got ace jack in the hole.
At best, right?
Yeah. But there's still two pairs not going to beat your trips.
Right. And that's the thing. In the musical version of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, in the closing number, after we have found out who the actual con artists are, it's 2 aces beat you blind, but they'll never beat 3 of a kind is what they say in the Dirty Rotten. And so I quote that to this kid and he goes, actually, I've got, 4 kings.
Oh shit.
Or no, it wasn't 4 of a kind. He had like quads. A full house. He had like a full house.
Oh, he had a full house.
Or a flush, one or the other.
Those are 2 very different things.
I know. It was 5
of the same suit. That's a flush.
I know what it is. And I can't remember exactly what it is, but he beat you. He had something that was way better.
You had trips. He had something better.
Way better.
Yeah.
And he had played it so nonchalantly the whole time that he played the hell out of me. And
I wonder who it was. It would have been at poker nights. I'm wondering who that.
And a kid I don't think I've ever seen before or ever before that night. Sure. And I was just like,
of course, no money was being risked.
Right.
So
and I was so excited because I was going to put it out there and be like, I quoted a musical as part of it.
When I was in Canada last week in Saskatchewan for 4 days. By the way, don't go.
Speaking of a boot,
if you're from North Dakota, just because you've been there,
you've seen it.
Nice people, but metric system. Come on.
You had trouble in your car with that.
Yeah, I had to call JJ the moment they let me into Canada because first they said, "Get out of your car, sir. What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm teaching agronomists how to shoot video." And
no, you're not, eh?
They were like, "Why?" They let me into the country, and then as I'm driving, I realized, oh shit, I haven't turned the car over to metric. And I don't know how to. So I had to call JJ. We figured it out. But while I was there, I met some farmers and agronomists, and we go out to eat and have drinks or whatever. And it came up in conversation that I used to do poker TV. And one of the places we went had WPT playing right on the TV right above us. And they all ended up being poker players. And so I basically gave commentary on the hands we were watching while we were watching it.
Really?
And I thought, wow, I still remember all of it. I can't believe it.
Okay, so this is my tangent, my new tangent. One of my favorite things about the pandemic, and there's not a lot of things I loved about it.
Real high point for you, though, was.
Amy and I at KFGO invented parking lot bingo, where we would use a Zoom interface, but you would stay in your car and we would call bingo via Zoom. And then when you got a bingo, you honked your horn. And so we were hosting the largest events in the country in a 100% safe manner. Mm-hmm. People who had not left their homes felt comfortable because they're just inside their car, right? Mm-hmm. And you're parking, several feet, if not more, away from other people. Mm-hmm. It was just awesome. And so most of the time I called all of the bingo, and I really missed my calling as a bingo caller because I came up with all this terminology. So there's some already assumed bingo lingo, things like B11, pair of legs, and then you go
nice,
right? Okay. And then there was before and not after before, right? So then I started adding my own little pieces in there. So for example, N33, pregnant twins. Because if you look at how the threes bend out, right, it looks like two pregnant sisters. And the one that nobody got, and I had to explain, but I'd never explain it over the air or on the radio, was N44, twin brothers returning from war. And they had always said, well, why?
They're each missing a leg.
No,
that's what I thought it
no.
was.
It's even weirder. It's because the 4, it looks like their backpack, right? Like, so that's their rucksack.
So I'm thinking of the 4 like this.
No,
like
and
an
it's
H without a leg.
No, and it's not. It's the 4 where it's got the triangle and then the
There's gotta be words for different kinds of 4s, but okay.
Yeah, the different design of it. And they go, well, why not just, why is it twin brothers? And I'm like, well, because they both got little wieners. And the people who finally, in fact, could that be the image? Just
Sure.
like a 44 on
Just
this. It has
a
nothing to do with
44.
the number of the,
Yeah,
but like find a bingo card
I'll
and
find
just
it.
like, yeah. And the people, so every now and then people will still, even today, people will come up to me and be like, hey, it was a lot of fun was going and playing parking lot bingo. Mm-hmm. And you know what else was a lot of fun? One of the first movies I saw in theaters was Sonic the Hedgehog.
There you go.
You like that?
I do like that.
Those tangents found itself all the way back to the Sonic
I'm trying to remember.
series.
I'm trying to figure out. So because it was the first movie post-pandemic that you saw in the theater. Yeah.
Technically, it wasn't the first. The first
That you
movie.
saw.
No. The first movie that I saw was that weird X-Men kids in the insane asylum.
New Mutants?
Yeah.
Oh, I have actually not seen that.
You're not missing anything.
The thing is that I want to be a superhero completist for movies.
Mm-hmm.
So like if it's a Marvel or DC movie, I need to see it.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots I haven't seen still, but New Mutants is on there.
Oh boy, wait until you watch Madam Web.
Oh yeah.
Forced myself to watch that recently.
I'm kind of thinking about waiting and then just doing a marathon of like Morbius, Madam Web, and Kraven the Hunter, and then probably killing myself after.
Well, what about the Venoms? You got to include the
I've seen them
Venoms in
already.
there. Oh, okay.
I've seen them already, but I haven't seen It's Morbin Time or Madame Web.
Yeah.
Even though I love Dakota Johnson.
You know what's funny?
She could have me if she played her cards right.
Not after this movie. I'm telling you,
I would still.
I know you'd love to think that, but let me put it this way.
If she saw me and was like you, I'd be like, yeah, me. Yeah.
She's like you, and she's like
finger gunned me like that too.
Yeah,
She'd be like, hey,
finger gun you,
and I'd be like, yeah,
and
that's
she's
right,
like,
Cupid.
listen, we just have to sit through a screening of my movie, and then you and I afterwards, it's going to be passionate lovemaking. I'm telling you, by minute 25, you'd be like, hey, listen, I gotta go.
Hey, do you have Sydney Sweeney's phone number?
Who's that guy who's after you? I've got some questions for him. And so, but that has nothing to do with Sonic the Hedgehog, other than the fact of they missed an opportunity in the MCU of having Jim Carrey play some kind of a role. I don't know what he would have played.
Well, I
in
mean,
the MCU.
they still could. I mean, it's not like it's off the table.
I think that he's going to be busy making these Sonic movies until the end of time.
I'm just going to quote like a rando Reddit user from yesterday. They were saying like, have you ever noticed how Jim Carrey's basically given up on Hollywood except the Sonic movies? They're like, hey, come do Sonic. And he's like, absolutely, I'm there.
I think they let him do whatever he wants.
He looks like he's having a ton of fun, and he's now full on Robotnik. Like he is the Robotnik. He's also playing Robotnik's father, which is a character. I guess is a character in the game.
Gerald Robotnik, right?
Think
Is that his name?
Something like that. For me, Sonic ended at Sonic, like 3-year Sonic and Knuckles. Like that was when I was kind of like, okay, I'm just not into Sonic new stuff since then.
Before we end this episode, could you remind me of what Brad Delzer's name was in the Tucker universe of films?
Oh, it was shoot, I haven't thought about that.
I know what it is.
Oh, it was Gerald Ustanko.
How'd you come up with the name Ustanko?
That was the name. Gerald Ustanko was on a billboard in Fargo for a like a local lawyer, spelled exactly the way I spelled it. And I remember thinking, "There's no way that's his name," or I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And I don't. I never got the full pronunciation from someone who knew him.
Ustanko.
Is it Ustanko?
I don't know.
I don't know, but it's Ustanko and Gerald. So Gerald Ustanko is from a billboard that was in Fargo.
I was driving through Bismarck once, and they had a billboard for like congratulating a young like high school like player of the week, and his name was Scooter Pinks. And I said, the kids who are writing the bylines and the headlines for their school paper are having the best time ever. Cause like Pinks sinks 35th, like how perfect is that? And if your name is Scooter Pinks, you've already been blessed by the gods. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. I think it would have been interesting if you had created another character for Brad called Gerald Meestanko.